Good evening, friends. Tonight, let's go back to the north, back to deep winter, the Viking winter. It's long, it's dark, it's cold in a way that feels almost creative, like the world is inventing new kinds of cold just to challenge you. How do you survive months like this? Days when the sun barely shows its face. The answer is warmer, smarter, and honestly tastier than you might expect. Now, dim the lights, get comfortable, and come with me into tonight's story. You are standing in an open field. The air is thick with the smell of wet earth and dead grass. The sky is a dull, heavy grey. The clouds hang so low, it feels like they might fall and crush the world. Every breath you exhale turns into a little white puff in front of your face, then vanishes in the wind. The wind is changing. There's a feeling in it, something sharp and northern that you've never felt before. Everyone around you is moving fast. There's no idle wandering, no casual talk. The men are shouting to each other as they drag the last cartloads of firewood out of the tree line. Beside the longhouse, the woodpile is already as tall as a small hill. The women are bent low to the ground, pulling up the last surviving root vegetables before the soil freezes hard. Turnips, carrots, onions. They toss them quickly into woven baskets. Even the children are working, small shapes darting between adults' legs, gathering loose hay into tight bundles. Then someone points upward and yells. You look at the sky. Something tiny and white spins down through the air. Then another. Then another. The first snow has arrived. It came without warning, and the entire settlement goes quiet for one brief second. Everyone stops. Everyone looks up. The expression on their faces is complicated. It's awe. It's respect. It's also acceptance. Because every Viking here knows what that first snow means. It's the signal. It's the announcement that the outside world, the world of fields, boats, sunlight, water, and open air, is now closed. From this moment on, for months, your entire world will shrink down to one building, the Longhouse. A tall, broad-shouldered man with frost in his beard waves at you. You hurry to join the others. Together you start driving the animals in, pushing sheep and a few stubborn cows toward the doorway of the Longhouse. This building is huge, low, and long. It's not just home, it's survival, it's community, it's law, it's memory. The animals are herded into one end of the Longhouse, onto a floor covered with straw. They bleat and complain and stamp around. The smell hits immediately. Sheep, cattle, dung, wet fur. It's sharp, animal, alive, and strangely comforting. Because this is one of the first great Viking winter tricks. People and livestock live under the same roof. The animals get shelter from storms, and in return, their body heat helps warm the house. No wasted calories, no wasted warmth. You move the last supplies inside. Someone is carrying a basket of dark, brick-like blocks. You pick one up, curious. It's light, dry, rough. It smells faintly grassy and smoky. A boy next to you grins when he sees your face. That's fuel, he says. We depend on it in winter. And then you understand. All summer and autumn people collected animal manure, mixed it with straw, shaped it, and dried it into bricks. Dung fuel. Firewood is precious, needed for building and smithing, not just heating. So these humble manure bricks will burn slow, steady, and long. Not glamorous, but reliable. In the north, reliable is luxury. You hear two older men muttering near the door. One of them says, "Snow came early this year. Maybe it's Fimble winter." The other one frowns and tells him not to talk nonsense. You've heard this word before, Fimble winter. In Norse myth, it's the great winter before Ragnarok, the twilight of the gods. 3 years of endless cold, no summer, no relief. Of course, they'll tell you it's just a story. But stories like that don't come from nowhere. Historians believe that in the 6th century AD, a little before the peak Viking Age, a series of volcanic eruptions threw ash into the atmosphere, blocking sunlight. Global temperatures dropped, harvests failed. There was famine and mass death across parts of Europe. That memory, passed down in fragments, may be the real root of the Fimbulwinter legend. So when the first snow falls earlier than expected, when the wind feels wrong, when the animals act nervous, people remember. You close the longhouse door behind you. The heavy wooden door shuts with a thud, sealing out the pale world of ice and wind. Instantly, everything changes. The outside is silent, white, and empty. The inside hits you like a wall. Heat from bodies and fire, the smell of smoke and sweat and stew, the noise of voices and clattering tools. You blink. You've just stepped into the place where you're going to spend almost the entire winter. This is a Viking longhouse, and for the next few months this building is your entire universe. Your eyes adjust. The longhouse is shaped like an upside-down boat. The roof curves in an arch. That design isn't an accident. It helps shed snow and keeps the structure strong. There are no inner walls. It's basically one long hall. A long, shallow fire pit runs down the middle of the floor. The flames flicker and lick the bottoms of heavy iron pots hanging over them. Shadow light moves across the beams above you, across the thatch, across carved wood, across faces. The walls are made of thick timber planks, with moss and straw stuffed in the gaps to block drafts. In some places, especially where wood was harder to get, like Iceland, homes weren't built from big timbers at all. Settlers there built turf houses, thick walls made from stacked blocks of sod, sometimes more than 2 meters thick. A good turf wall was like living inside the earth itself, insulated, windproof, warm. Along both sides of the fire pit, raised wooden platforms run the length of the hall. During the day, people sit there to work, talk, and eat. At night, those same platforms become beds. You throw down furs, wool blankets, cloaks. Privacy does not exist. You're seeing men, women, children, elders, all in the same room. You hear babies crying. You hear people arguing quietly. You hear sheep complaining at the far end of the hall. You hear somebody laughing too loud at their own joke. This isn't a romantic movie version of the past. This is crowded, smoky, alive. You tilt your head back and notice something else. There's smoke in the air, but the building isn't filled with choking black fog the way you'd expect. Near the top ridge of the roof, at each end of the longhouse, there are openings. Cold air comes in low from one end, pushes the hot smoky air upward, and the smoke escapes out the other end. It's a natural convection system. No chimney, no fan, no electricity, just design. In Old Norse, the opening for air and smoke was sometimes described with a word that later evolved into the English word window. What you're looking at now is, in a way, one of the earliest windows, not for looking through glass, but for letting a house breathe. Time passes, the animals settle, the fire evens out, people find their places along the benches. And now you have your first real problem of the night. You have to go back outside. There's something stored in a shed not far from the longhouse. Dried fish, tools, maybe a skin of ale. And you're the one who needs to go get it. And that means going back into the cold. In this world, getting dressed is not getting dressed. It's armour. First, you pull on a long-sleeved linen undertunic. Linen isn't as warm as wool, but it's comfortable against the skin and it wicks sweat away. Cotton didn't exist in Northern Europe as an everyday fabric at this time. Linen and wool was standard. Wealthy people sometimes let the edges of their fine linen shirt peek out past their outer clothing on purpose. A little flex. You pull a heavier wool tunic over that. Wool is life in the north. Wool keeps you warm even when damp. Your tunic is dyed a deep red, maybe using plant dyes like madder root. Bright colour meant effort, trade, status. The cuffs and collar might be decorated with woven trim. Patterned bands that are both beautiful and a sign of skill and rank. On your legs, you wear wool trousers. The exact cut of Viking trousers is debated by archaeologists. Some finds suggest looser, baggy styles for movement. Others suggest tighter, leg wrap styles. What you're wearing is somewhere in between, loose enough to work, narrow enough at the ankle to go into your boots. Now comes one of the most iconic parts, the leg wraps. You take long strips of wool, maybe 2 inches to 4 inches wide, and you wrap them tightly from just below the knee, down toward the ankle, layer by layer, making a snug spiral. No buttons, no zippers, just friction and tension. Done right, they hold perfectly. They keep your lower legs warm. They protect your trousers from mud, snow, thorns. They add support when you walk long distances. They are unbelievably practical. You pull on thick wool socks. But these aren't modern knitted socks. True knitting with 2 needles wasn't common yet in the Viking Age. Instead, people used a technique called null binding, looping and knotting yarn with a single large needle to make fabric that feels almost like dense felt. Null-bound socks are tough, warm, and basically immortal. Then come the leather boots, stuffed with dry straw for extra insulation. Then a heavy wool cloak, fastened at the shoulder or chest with a brooch of bronze or silver. Maybe the edge of the cloak is trimmed with fur. Fox, sheep, sometimes something rarer if you're wealthy. Hat, mittens, done. You're no longer just dressed. You are temperature managed. Layered linen to pull moisture off the skin. Wool to keep heat in. Leg wraps to protect and stabilize. Leather to block wind and snow. Fur to shield exposed areas. This is not fashion. This is engineering. You push open the longhouse door. The cold slams into you instantly. Raw, physical, almost violent. But this time you're ready. You feel sealed, contained. You feel like a walking shelter. Later that evening, the work of the day starts to slow. The longhouse gathers around the central fire for the main meal. The smell in the air is thick, heavy, savoury, and a little sour. A woman hands you a wooden bowl. Inside is something somewhere between a stew and a thick porridge. It's full of soft meat, root vegetables, bits of grain. This kind of all-day, always-on stew, where the pot never truly empties, it's just constantly topped up with whatever you have, is one of the most important ways people survive winter. Nothing is wasted. But when you raise a spoonful of meat to your mouth, you flinch. It's sour, not rotten, sour. That's deliberate. In summer and fall, when meat is plentiful, Vikings preserve it. One method: boil or cook meat, then pack it into tubs and cover it in soured whey. The acidic liquid left over from cheese making, rich in lactic acid. In an airtight container, that acid prevents spoilage and tenderizes the meat. It can last for months. Does it taste strange to you? Yes. Would it taste comforting to them? Also, yes. That sourness is the taste of safety. The taste of, we will have protein in January. You also get a few strips of dark dried fish, likely cod. In the cold months of autumn, fish are cleaned and hung outdoors on wooden racks. The freezing dry air and steady wind slowly dehydrates them into something like boards, hard as wood, basically immortal. Before eating, you have to pound it with a mallet to soften the fibres. Then you either boil it in the pot, or you just tear off chewy pieces and gnaw. It's salty, dense, concentrated. You watch someone slice a dark, smoked leg of meat that has been hanging from the rafters. The smoke from the fire drifts upward and slowly cures anything stored up there. No modern smokehouse. The longhouse itself is the smokehouse. Again, nothing wasted. All winter food culture is one long chess match against decay. Salt, smoke, drying, souring, freezing, everything is about trapping time. Locking in summer so you can open it again in February. After the meal, you think maybe people will relax, sit, tell stories, fall asleep. No, not yet. Here's another truth about winter in a Viking settlement. Winter is not rest, winter is production. Next to you, the woman who handed you the stew presses something into your hands. A drop spindle and a handful of wool. She shows you how to pull a small amount of wool fibre with one hand and spin the weighted spindle with the other. The spindle twists the fibres together into yarn. It looks simple. It's not. Your first attempts are clumsy. The yarn goes lumpy, too thick, too thin, then snaps. She corrects your hands. Slower pull. Even twist. Control the feed. Try again. Around you, every woman, from grey-haired grandmother to a girl who can't be more than 7, is spinning. Constantly. Quietly. Patiently. Why? Because textiles are labour. Mountains of labour. A single plain wool tunic, just one, can easily represent hundreds of hours of human work, from shearing the sheep, cleaning the wool, spinning the yarn, weaving the cloth, and sewing and trimming the garment. A cloak with pattern trim? More. And then there are sails. You've seen those longships on the coast, the sleek boats with the tall square sails. Those sails are made of heavy, tightly woven wool. They have to be strong enough to hold wind like a fist and carry a boat across the open sea. One large sail could require the wool of hundreds of sheep. Spinning that much thread by hand is not a hobby. It's the industrial backbone of the entire culture. The men are busy too. Some of them are sharpening axes, spearheads, and sayax knives with slow practice movements. Firelight flashes along the blades. Others are repairing tools, rehafting an axe head onto a new wooden handle, fixing a broken rake, shaping a new wooden spoon, carving a storage chest. You glance over and see one man bent over a block of wood, carving an intricate animal knot pattern, filling every inch of the surface with twisting lines of dragons and beasts, no empty space left. You look down at your spindle. The yarn is finally forming smooth and even under your fingertips, and you understand something. Winter is the factory. Spring and summer might be the time of raiding, exploring, farming, sailing, but winter is where all of that is prepared. Wool is spun now. Weapons are maintained now. Repairs are made now. Boats are planned now. Culture, stories, law, alliances is reinforced now. Winter is logistics. Winter is infrastructure. Then the door opens and the atmosphere shifts. A high-ranking man enters, a jarl, a local chieftain. He's tall and broad, with carefully kept blonde hair and a beard braided and decorated. He wears a dark blue wool cloak, edged with fur. A round silver brooch pins it in place. Heavy silver rings rest on his wrists. When he walks in, the room changes. People stand. The owner of the house, a free land-holding farmer, known in Old Norse terms as a carl, gives up the best seat by the central fire and offers it to the jarl. You watch what just happened. You just saw Viking social structure live. Viking society, broadly, had status layers. At the top in a region, jarls, powerful leaders, war chiefs, political figures. The backbone, carls, free farmers, craftspeople, traders. At the bottom, thralls, enslaved people, prisoners of war, people born into slavery, or people forced into bondage to pay debts. Thralls are here in the Longhouse too. You see them now, once you know to look. Rough, undyed clothing, close-cut hair, quiet posture, always working, always available. They don't get a bench. They squat near the fire to add wood. They serve. They listen for orders. The class system is not subtle. It's visible in who sits where, who gets meat first, whose jokes get laughed at, whose voice can interrupt the room. In Norse myth, there's even a story, usually called Rigg's Song, that tries to explain and justify this class system. The god Rigg, often identified with Heimdall, visits 3 different households. From the poorest couple come the thralls, dark, strong, doing hard labour. From the middle couple come the carls, red-haired, healthy, skilled farmers. From the wealthiest couple come the jarls, fair, armed, noble, destined to rule. The message of that myth is not subtle either. It says, class is not random, class is divine. So when the jarl sits in the high seat, the honour seat, often marked by carved high seat pillars symbolising the family's authority, it's not just comfort, it's power, performed in public. His personal warriors sit around him. Everyone else adjusts. Conversation shifts. This is also politics. A winter visit from a jarl isn't just social. He is here to reinforce loyalty, settle disputes, arrange marriages, make sure everyone still accepts his authority before spring comes and men start sailing. While the jarl negotiates quietly with the head of the household, you drift to the far end of the longhouse. That's where the children have taken over a corner. Even here, in the dead of winter, with snow piled outside the door, life is loud. 2 boys, maybe 7 or 8 years old, are having an intense mock sword fight with carved wooden sticks. They're copying the posture, the shouts, the bravado of adult warriors. A young girl nearby sits on a fur, humming to herself while she cradles a scrap-cloth doll. Beside her is a tiny stone hand mill, a miniature version of the real quern stones used to grind grain. She drops a few dried berries in and grinds them, practicing the movements she'll be expected to know as an adult. This is school. There are no classrooms here. No writing lessons for most people. Children learn by doing adult tasks in miniature. Girls learn spinning, weaving, dairying, cooking, managing food stores. Boys learn animal care, woodwork, tools, rowing, and, very early, fighting. The play is not just play, it's rehearsal. Another day. Steam fills the longhouse. Today is bath day. You might not expect this, but personal hygiene actually mattered a lot in Viking society. Archaeologists have found tons of personal grooming tools in Viking graves and settlements. Combs made from bone or antler, tweezers to pluck hairs, small ear spoons to clean ears. These items weren't rare luxury goods. Ordinary people had them. Washing, by their standards, wasn't optional. Here's how they're doing it tonight. People heat water by dropping fire-heated stones into barrels and tubs brought indoors. You undress, not privately in a modern bathroom, but openly, in rotation, in community. You scrub with soap made from animal fat and ash. You comb your hair, you trim, you talk, you trade news. Cleanliness here is not just about health, it's dignity, it's morale, it's protection of status. There are even medieval written sources from other cultures talking about this. Some Christian writers in England complained that Vikings bathed and combed their hair so often that local women found them attractive. On the other hand, the 10th century Arab diplomat Ahmad ibn Fadlan wrote about a Scandinavian group he met on the Volga River and called them the filthiest of God's creatures, describing them washing their faces and spitting into the same shared basin of water. So were Vikings clean or dirty? The answer is, it depends who you ask, where, and when. Hygiene is partly reality and partly culture shock. But inside this longhouse, right now, washing matters. In the Norse wisdom poem Havamal, there's advice that basically says, clean yourself, eat and get ready every day, because you never know where you'll end up by nightfall. Fate is unpredictable. Death can come at any time, so you should always be prepared to meet the gods looking respectable. Later that night, you notice two men sitting on the floor between the benches, leaning over a wooden board with a grid carved into it. They're completely locked in, focused, silent. They're playing a game. The game is called Hanafatafel, usually translated as King's Table or Viking Chess. The board is an 11-head 11 grid. In the centre there's a special piece, the king. Around him are his defenders, a smaller force. On the edges of the board sit the attackers, a larger force trying to surround and capture him. The goal of the defenders is to get the king safely to one of the corners. The goal of the attackers is to trap and capture the king. This is not a symmetrical game like modern chess. It's offense versus defense, ambush versus escape. It's strategy training. It's a way to think like a war leader without blood. Archaeologists have found Hanafatafel boards and playing pieces not only in Scandinavia, but also in places Vikings travelled and settled. The British Isles, Iceland, Greenland. In one famous burial in Birka, Sweden, a high-status warrior grave that later evidence showed belonged to a woman, gaming pieces were found alongside weapons. That shocked a lot of scholars. It challenged old assumptions that warfare and strategy were purely male spaces. It suggested that elite women could also participate in planning, intelligence, command, not just household work. So, when these two men lean over their board in the firelight, they're not just killing time. They're practicing how to think. Days pass. The long nights blur together. Work, stew, spinning, smoke, repair, storytelling. And then, the mood changes. Tonight is special. Tonight is Yule. Yule is the great midwinter festival. It marks the hardest part of the dark season, and it tries to punch straight through it. The celebration begins with fire. Several men drag in a massive log, big enough to burn for days. This is the Yule log. When it's set into the central fire and catches, the flames leap high, lighting every corner of the hall. People cheer. The message is simple. The sun may be weak right now, but it's not gone. The light will come back. The table is different tonight too. There's meat, good meat, rich meat. Pork is especially important and symbolically tied to certain Norse gods like Freyja, associated with fertility and prosperity. Barrels of ale and mead are rolled out. Drinking at Yule is not casual, it's ritual. Horn cups are raised in rounds of toasts called bragaful, and other formal toasts. The first to Odin, for victory and wisdom. The next to other gods, like Njord and Freyja, for peace and good harvest. Another to the ancestors. People pour out a share of their drink in memory of the dead, inviting them to join the feast. Yule is a bridge between the living and the dead, between the freezing present and the promised spring. Then comes the oath. A boar, sometimes called the sacrificial boar or oath boar, is led into the hall. Men lay their hands on its bristled back and swear vows aloud. I will break new ground for planting. I will raid across the sea and come back with silver. I will take a wife. These are not New Year's resolutions that you quietly abandon in February. These are public promises witnessed by your community and the gods. Your honor is now attached to your words. Afterward, that same boar may be sacrificed and eaten as a sacred meal. Yule is part feast, part group therapy, part contract signing with destiny. It tells people, yes, it's cold, it's dark, you're tired, but the story isn't over. Spring is coming. The hall quiets again after Yule, but the mood is a little anxious now. Some lambs are sick. A young man broke his leg while hunting. The winter feels long, longer than usual. So the household elders make a decision. They will call a vulva, a seeress, a woman who practices cedar, Norse ritual magic of prophecy and influence. When she arrives, the room changes. People lower their voices. Even experienced warriors look nervous. She's an older woman in a dark blue cloak, trimmed with fur. She carries a carved wooden staff capped with metal. That staff is important. Staffs like that have actually been found in graves of suspected seeresses. A high seat is prepared for her, literally raising her above everyone else. At night, the ceremony begins. Her assistants, usually younger women, sit below her and begin to chant. The chant is repetitive, trance-like, strange and rhythmic. The air feels different, thick. The vulva's breathing changes. Her gaze goes distant. She's said to be travelling, leaving her body, crossing into the unseen world to ask questions. The head of the household steps forward and asks what everyone wants to know. Will this winter break soon? Will the sick animals live? Will the injured hunter heal? The vulva speaks, but not clearly. Fragments, images. Her assistants translate the message back into everyday language. It's not a simple yes, no fortune telling. It's more like spiritual reassurance combined with guidance. And here's something important. In Viking culture, Seder, this kind of magic, was seen as feminine. A man who practiced it could be mocked as unmanly, even shameful, because it was associated with manipulating fate indirectly instead of meeting it with a sword in your hand. That taboo shows up in the myths themselves. Loki insults Odin by accusing him of practicing cider like a woman, but at the same time, Odin is also described as the greatest magic user of all. So even the most masculine god secretly uses feminine magic because power is power. Reality is more complicated than the public performance. When the ritual ends, people seem calmer. The answers weren't exact, but they didn't need exact. What they needed was to hear. The winter will end. The sick may recover. You are not doomed. Hope is also food. Time moves. The arguments begin. One afternoon, two men, let's call them Bjorn and Eric, explode into a shouting match in the middle of the longhouse. The problem sounds simple. Bjorn lent Eric his axe. The axe came back with a chip missing from the blade. Bjorn says Eric damaged it. Eric swears he didn't. But this is not just an axe. An axe is wealth. An axe is status. An axe is survival. If this fight gets personal, it could easily turn violent. In a world where honor matters this much, accusing someone of damage or theft is close to accusing them of being dishonorable. The head of the household, we'll call him Harold, steps between them. He doesn't drag them outside. He doesn't throw anyone out. He does something very Viking instead. He turns the central fire area into a court. This is how Norse law generally functioned. There were formal public assemblies called things, where free men gathered to settle disputes. But at the local level, in daily life, Smaller versions of that process happened right here, in front of witnesses. Harold listens. Bjorn speaks first, describes the condition of the axe before and after. Eric answers, insists he returned it in good condition, suggests Bjorn is trying to blame him for damage that happened later. Harold asks if anyone else saw anything. A young man says he noticed Eric returning the axe quickly, in a hurry, avoiding conversation. It's not proof, but it's something, Harold thinks. And then he does something that tells you everything about Viking lore. He does not try to figure out absolute truth. He aims for restored balance. His ruling is this: Eric, you return the axe in worse condition than you borrowed it. Whether you damaged it or not, Bjorn has suffered loss and suspicion. You must compensate him. Bjorn, you have accused your neighbour without certain proof. You have damaged trust between you. So here is the judgment. Eric will give Bjorn 2 chickens as compensation. Bjorn will accept the payment. You will shake hands. You will share ale. And this matter is finished. That sounds simple, but it's actually huge. Viking law was famously based on compensation, not jail. Injury, pay, theft, pay. Even killing someone could be settled, in theory, if the killer paid the correct weregild or man price based on the dead person's social status. The goal was not lock the criminal in prison. They didn't have prisons like we do. The goal was prevent a blood feud that would tear the whole community apart, keep the social fabric intact until spring, keep everyone tied together inside this house, even when they're angry enough to kill each other. And somehow, it works. Bjorn and Eric exchange chickens and a very bitter drink. The tension lowers. Another tiny crack in winter is sealed. The weeks pass. The light changes. One day you notice something new. At midday, sunlight coming through the roof opening actually feels a little warm on your face. The icicles under the eaves start dripping. The air outside smells less like ice and more like wet soil. People keep glancing at the door. They're restless, nervous, hungry for movement. And finally, one morning, the announcement comes. It's time to check the ships. Almost every able-bodied man goes down to the shoreline. You go with them. Pulled up on the shore are several longships, shallow, flexible, fast boats with high carved prows shaped like dragon heads or beasts. In autumn, before the sea started freezing and the storms became lethal, the ships were hauled out of the water and propped up on wooden supports, covered, protected. Now the covers come off. The whole community turns into a shipyard. Some men crawl under the hulls, inspecting the keel and ribs for cracks. Viking ships were built using what's called clinker or lapstrake construction. Long, thin planks that overlap like fish scales, fastened with iron rivets. That overlapping gives the hull both strength and flexibility. It also means a lot of seams. Every single seam has to be sealed. Your job is to help scrape out old caulking and press in new. Caulking is made from things like animal hair or wool soaked in pine tar. You stuff the fibres into the gaps between planks, then smear hot tar over them. The tar waterproofs the hull and stops rot. It's sticky, messy, strong-smelling work. Your hands get stained. Your clothes get streaked. You're covered in black-brown resin and you smell like smoke and pine. It's perfect. Other people are checking the mast, retying rigging, inspecting oars, repairing shields that will hang along the sides of the ship. Women arrive carrying heavy rolls of thick winter-woven wool sailcloth. The sails are brought out, checked, patched, re-edged. Ropes are inspected, replaced, re-knotted. Every part of the ship is touched, tested, blessed by effort. Someone near you holds up a pale, milky stone, turning it slowly in the weak sunlight and watching how it glows. You've heard of this, a sunstone. Some historians believe Viking navigators may have used crystals like Iceland's spar, which can polarize light, to find the sun's position even on cloudy days, or when the sun was just below the horizon. No magnetic compass, no GPS, just stone, sky, and skill. You look around. The mood is electric. Hope, fear, restlessness, pride. This is not just maintenance. This is ceremony. This is the moment when winter turns into purpose. Because here is the last truth. Viking identity changes with the seasons. In winter, you are farmer, craftsperson, parent, neighbour. You keep animals alive. You mend tools. You spin wool until your hands ache. You sit in the dark and listen to stories. You survive together. In spring, that same community splits. Some people will stay and plant. Some will sail. Viking, in the original sense, wasn't even necessarily an ethnicity. It could be an activity. To go Viking meant to go raiding, adventuring, exploring, sometimes trading, sometimes attacking. The same man could be a quiet farmer in November and a terrifying raider in May. The cloak changes, the tools change, the face changes. The longhouse gathers at the shore to see off the first ship of the season. Provisions are loaded on board, hard flatbread made from rye or barley, barrels of dried fish, skins of water and ale. Weapons go next, spears, axes, round wooden shields painted with simple patterns or family marks. The square sail, repaired all winter, is finally rigged and tied. The carved dragon head at the prow catches the light. The chieftain says a few words, calling for Odin's wisdom, Thor's strength, Freya's good fortune. Families hug tightly. Wives' faces are proud but tight with worry. Children run in circles, shouting, imagining the day they'll stand on that deck themselves. Then, push, crew on board, lines off. The sail snaps open and fills. The ship moves, smooth and alive, toward the mouth of the fjord. Voices rise in a rowing song, low, powerful, steady. The longhouse behind you is still standing. The dung fuel is still stacked. The wool is still hanging to dry. The hearth is still burning. But everything has changed. Winter did not break them. Winter forged them. The darkness, the hunger, the boredom, the crowding, the constant work. That wasn't wasted time. That was training, refining, hardening. And so, when spring finally comes to the north, the people who walk out of that longhouse are not weak survivors crawling out of a cave. They are something much more dangerous, organized, equipped, bonded, and absolutely hungry. That is one secret of why the Viking Age happened the way it did. The cold didn't kill them. The cold built them. The wind off the water is no longer a knife. It's starting, just barely, to feel like promise.